This morning, we are talking to Pastor Andrew Morrell. Pastor Andrew Morrell is the church planter and pastor in Marion, Indiana for Real Community Covenant Church, a church plant of the Central Conference. And what a great treat to be able to talk with you this morning, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to sit down with the bishop of our conference and have some conversation.
Well, thank you. I had I don't want to jump the gun, but I had the pleasure of visiting your church last year, pre-COVID,
Yes.
and just had a great time. We'll talk a little bit about that, but you have a long and an amazing story of coming to Christ. How did you come to Christ?
I think that that's a good question. So at an early age in life, my grandfather and grandmother took me to church. There was a lady next door to me, actually, before my grandfather and grandmother took me to church, they took me to church. And then my grandfather started going to church, single parent home. My mom had to work a lot, so I spent the night a lot with my grandfather and my grandmother. And they went to church actually catty corner across from the street from where we planted the church. And it was several years there. I went to Sunday school, children's Sunday school, youth Sunday school. And at about 12 years old, my grandmother asked me, she said, you want to get baptized today? And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, let's do it, right? And I'm so grateful for that. And so I got baptized when I was about 12 years old, right across the street. Same pastors there. And one of the things I realized, so I got baptized, and then it kind of went back to doing what I was doing. I was a very broken young man. Got into a lot of things in terms of, alcohol, drugs at an early age, started drinking, smoking a little bit of weed here and there, started sex really early in life, 6th grade. And so I was just searching in my life for love, for affection. My father was in prison for most of my early childhood, growing up till I was about 12 years old. And then until I was 19, he got out for a short stint and went back until I was 19 years old. So I was really hurting without a father. And I had a young mom. My mom had me when she was 15 years old. And so just trying to navigate life and just a very broken young man, hurting. And through all of that, people came into my life that talked to me about Jesus, talked to me about the Lord. I made a decision to be baptized, but honestly, I didn't know what it meant to be a disciple of Jesus. And so, although I was baptized, I was involved in youth group here at another church with a guy who's a very good friend of mine and a mentor to me this day. And I used to go to youth ministry on Thursday nights at a church. And so I did all the church stuff, but I never knew what it meant to follow Jesus. And what I realized is that there was just a lack of discipleship for me. And so if I'm not being discipled in the church, life will disciple you. And so I was discipled in the world. I got into a lot of different things. I mean, I struggled with sexuality. I would say for probably a period of time in my life, I was bisexual. And nobody knew it because I was cool. And I could hide it because I was popular in school. I played sports, I had girlfriends, and that was what people were you were a young guy, you had girlfriends, you were considered popular and cool, but I was struggling with my sexuality and, in middle school and up until probably freshman, sophomore year in high school, just trying to figure out who I was. And so although I was baptized, I went to church, I still didn't know what it meant to follow Jesus. And so I went on through life, still broken as a young man, didn't really know how to be in a relationship with women and be faithful. Wasn't very faithful to any girlfriend I was with, very selfish, got into, drugs and alcohol, started selling drugs, trying to just find my place in life. And then I had a friend who, he went to play professional basketball in the NBA. And so he lived in Portland, Oregon. And I stayed with him off and on for a few years. And then I was just exposed to a whole new level of, I was already involved in sin at a pretty high level. And this just gives you so much more access. And so honestly, I was about 24. I got shot in the face in 2003. I was about 22 years old. I got shot with a bullet, point blank range. Bullet went through my face and then got stuck in the back of my neck. And they had to actually remove the bullet from the back of my neck. And that whole night when I was shot, they were trying to kill somebody else, but they shot me because I was sitting in the passenger side of his truck. And that night when that happened, I had a peace about me that I can't even explain. Like, I knew I wasn't going to die. The guy who was supposed to be shot, he's crying. He's like, Drew, I'm sorry. And I said, listen, Josh, I'm going to be okay. And I'm smiling and my face is just leaking with blood, waiting for the ambulance to get there. Ambulance comes, takes me to the hospital. They do a CAT scan, X-ray. Make a long story short, there's nothing wrong with me. They say the bullet's stuck in your neck. The doctor will come in the morning. One second. The doctor will come in the morning and remove the bullet. And so doctor came in 11 o'clock in the morning. First thing he said to me was, young man, I don't know how close you are to God, but you're a destined man. And so like that, and he explained the gunshot where I got shot. He said, where the bullet traveled through your face and your neck. He said, your main artery, your jugular vein, all comes through your neck here. And the main nerve that controls the whole left side of your face is through here. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have any broken bones or anything. Wow. And so honestly, from that, I just stuck in the back of my mind, like God was with me at a very, very crucial moment in my life and spared my life. And so that happened in 2003. I went on to live on. So I went to church that following Sunday, gave my testimony, and then like went right back to doing what I was doing, as if I just didn't have a moment in my life where God was like intervening in my life. And so a couple more years went by and I got involved in some other things, and I seen some other things in life that I wish I had never seen, Danny. And God was just showing me how bad life can get. And God spared me even more for some things that I can't talk about right here.
Sure.
And it was in 2005, 2006, I began to just look at my life and think about where I was at. And drugs, women, all of these things, money that I thought that was telling me that it would please me, that it would bring me joy in life. After I indulged in these things, I did these things, like I felt so empty. I just felt empty. And I just got to a place in my life where I just got sick of being empty. I got sick of like being unfulfilled in life, the world promising you so much and always falling short. And honestly, I came back home and I went to the church that I grew up in, and the pastor made the altar call that day. And I went forward, old apostolic Pentecostal church. And I just went forward that day to the altar and I surrendered my life to Jesus. And there was just something different about that time. And another thing that happened was there were some men that got involved in my life that actually walked with me and helped me to learn how to follow Jesus. And so that's what happened. And even before that, Danny, another amazing story that came out of being shot was the guy who shot me ended up killing somebody after he shot me. He went to prison and he never got in trouble for shooting me. And I never told anybody about who did it. But after he shot me, I didn't know who it was right away. I began to pray for the person who shot me. I hadn't even given my life to Jesus yet. And I began to pray for the person who shot me, prayed for him for years. And then one day my cousin called me in prison in 2008. I had given my life to Christ in 2006. And in 2008, my cousin called me from prison and said, hey, Drew, do you know the guy who shot you? And I said, yeah, I told him his name. And my cousin was in prison with him in Michigan City, Indiana, in the state prison. And he said, Drew, do you want us to get him? And without a shadow of a doubt, I totally believe my cousin and the people that I grew up with that were with him, they probably would have killed him. No problem at all. And I said, no. I said, no, cousin, I've given my life to Jesus, man. I said, God has transformed my life. I said, I've forgiven the guy who shot me. I said, as a matter of fact, I've been praying to be able to talk to him one day. I said, would you put him on the phone? And he said, what? I said, would you put him on the phone? He said, you serious? I said, man, Jesus is real, man. So he said, hold up. And so he went and got the guy. out of his dorm. Here's this guy just a few minutes ago. He would have done something too. You know what I mean? Now he's going to bring him on the phone. And the guy gets on the phone and I say, little D, you don't know me. I don't know you. I said, but you shot me 5 years ago in the face outside of the club Oasis in Anderson. I said, do you remember that night? He said, yeah, I do. I said, I just want you to know that I've given my life to Jesus. God has forgiven me of my sin, brother, and I've forgiven you. And I've been praying to talk to you for a long time, and here we are. And I just want you to know that I don't know where you're at with the Lord, but that Jesus loves you. Jesus is real, man, and he wants to save you. And although you are where you're at, life ain't over. And he was just quiet, and he said, thank you. I said, so, brother, I'm going to keep praying for you, and I hope one day that we can actually sit down and look at each other in the face and talk. And he was just speechless, to be honest. And so he said, thank you. I said, brother, I'll pray for you. I love you. I'll keep praying for you. He gave the phone back to my cousin. And my cousin said, Drew, I'll call you right back. I said, okay. And so my cousin called me right back. He ended up talking to this guy. And the guy said, man, I didn't know this was your cousin. He said, it just effed me up what this guy just said to me. And that's what the gospel does to us. It really F's us up to realize the goodness of God.
Do not say that when you preach on midwinter or gather.
Yeah, right. And he said that guy just said, he just turned around and walked out. And then from that day on, every time my cousin would call me the next year or two, he always said that guy was asking about me. So what I realized is that although God had allowed me to go through all this, it really wasn't about me. It was really about God and how God uses us if we're willing to be used to be a vessel for someone else. And so that's part of my journey in terms of how I came to Jesus. So that when that happened, I gave my life to Jesus. There were some men that came alongside of me, man, and helped me walk and learn what it meant to follow Jesus.
Yeah. Wow. You know, this is not the first time I hear your testimony, but it continues to be as powerful as always. Tell us a little bit about your family. You're a married man. You're a dad. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Married man, yeah. So I have, I've got a daughter, Sophia. She's 10 years old, lives with us. My wife, Casey. And then we have two older kids, Wyatt and Madison. Wyatt's 23, Madison's 21. They're out of the house. So Casey had two children before we got together. And so, I had an already made family, and Sophia comes, we get married. And so, so there's five of us in the family, and there's just three of us in the house now, which, we miss Wyatt and Madison. My wife, I love my wife. I tell you, my wife, I've probably never told her this, but my wife has probably been the biggest demonstration of God's grace in my life.
Wow. You should tell her that, Pastor.
I'm gonna tell her that.
Yeah. Or show her this interview when it airs.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Just because someone who didn't know, I didn't see healthy relationships, and coming from where I come from, and my wife has been so gracious to me, so forgiving to me, and just so gentle to me. She don't take my crap, but she's just been so good to me, and I have a great wife. I really do. And so our children, Wyatt and Madison, they're both here. Wyatt's in Marion. Madison lives about 20 minutes north of here. I'm proud of them and love them deeply, and they're navigating through adulthood. They're figuring out what adulting is. And Sophia, she's in 5th grade this year. She just started 5th grade. And so it's just a joy to watch her grow and mature. And
very smart young girl.
She is. Yeah. So that's my family.
Yeah, and a lovely family at that.
Yeah.
How did you get connected to the covenant?
Funny. So how I got connected to the covenant was Sean Marshall. Okay. Sean Marshall. So when I was just telling you about kind of my early childhood youth ministry, there were several different youth ministries that were going on in the city. And so Sean was part of one of the other youth ministries at St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, along with a guy named Dwayne Choice, who was youth pastor at that time, and who's also from Chicago. And so Sean came to Marion to go to Indiana Wesleyan University, and he was reaching out to youth while he was here. And I was one of those youth that he was reaching out to, because I was just a few years younger than Sean. He was in college, but I was in high school, like a freshman, I think it was. And so I had met Sean in high school. So then Sean comes back with Dwayne. Dwayne's pastoring at Citadel of Faith in Michigan, where Sean was at. And Dwayne had come back to Marion to visit and brought Sean with him. And I knew God was calling me to plant a reconciling church in my hometown. Like I knew it wasn't supposed to be anywhere else. I just didn't know how it was going to happen and who it was going to be with.
Yeah.
And I knew that it had to be with the denomination, because I had the opportunity to plant solo, but I didn't think that was healthy. It just didn't sound healthy to be by yourself, not part of a denomination. So I didn't do it. And so I just waited. And so Sean came back. He said, "Hey, Drew, what you doing? What are you doing now?" And I said, "I just graduated IWU, the Christian Ministries major. God's called me to plant a church here. Don't know how it's going to happen, but I know God's calling me to do it. And so I'm just waiting on him, trusting him." And then he said, "Have you ever heard of the covenant?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Man, the covenant? What is that? What is the covenant?" I heard it. I grew up in Pentecostal church. I know about Baptist, missionary Baptist, Wesleyans. This is a large Wesleyan area. The covenant, who is that? And so Sean invited me to Exponential as a friend of the Great Lakes Conference.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, I went to Exponential. I was a friend of the covenant with the Great Lakes Conference. I met Larry Sherman there. And Alex Rahill was trying to recruit me to come to Michigan to plant a church in Michigan. And so I went there, and I went to I went into this room because the covenant had this pre-conference before Exponential started. They had like this pre-conference.
Yeah.
And when I walked into this room, I seen the kingdom of God. I'm talking about pastors from Asia, India, African American, Latino. When I walked in there and seen these pastors from these different churches, I said, "Oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Sign me up." So that week went great. And so then we began the process to I started courting with David Swanson. He was the director of church planning at that time. So David and I started courting through email, and I was interested to plant. And so I went through the process to plant with the Central Conference in the Evangelical Covenant Church. And so that's how it was. It was through Sean Marshall. I got introduced to the covenant.
Well, that's a good introduction. Yeah. with Sean. Hey, I've had the opportunity to visit your church, and when you talk about real, not only do you do that with your own personal testimony, it is a real community. It's a community that's transparent, that's inclusive, that really loves their neighbors, and it is neighborhood people. I was blown away also by just how diverse it is. So it's multicultural. You have people from almost every nation there. Mm-hmm. You're multi-generational. You have people from different ages there. But you also do not, in those churches, there are some churches that are multicultural, but they're also socioeconomic, and that holds them together.
Yep.
Or even you can be multi-generational as long as you have the same socioeconomic background. Your church has very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. Tell me a little bit about that. How we know that it's messy. Yeah. How is that working out at the church?
Yeah, it is messy. And so what you realize is like, 1 Corinthians 13 actually is meant to be performed within the context of a congregation of people. And so like this love that is patient, love that's kind, love that does not rejoice in wrongs, but rejoice, like learning how to actually perform this and live this out in the midst of all of this diversity is something that we have to do. And so obviously, like, in order for us, we realize that because because we're in the Western culture, and because the Western church has kind of dominated the ways in which we do things, we realize that can't happen in every asset, every area of the church. Like, we have to do something different. So then, like, we're going to have leaders of color. If we're going to be this kind of church that does this well, leaders of color are non-negotiable. And so, obviously women and who we want to be is who we have to be demonstrating from the very beginning. And so from the very beginning, we had the right people at the very beginning who felt the call. Actually, one of our guys who's preaching this Sunday, he told me when I told him, a guy was calling me to plant this church and to do this, and I could pray about being part of this. He told me, he said, "You crazy as hell. That ain't gonna work here." And because of the racial divide that still exists, not only in our country, but even in Marion, as the place of the last official lynching in the northern U.S. happened here in Marion in 1930. And so, this is a man who comes from the South, African American, who comes from Mississippi, right? His mother worked on a plantation. So like, when he says you're crazy as hell, he understands the deep history of racism in America and how it's impacted his family. So you do it delicately. You trust God through it. There's apologizing because there's just things that we do out of ignorance, and we don't mean to hurt each other, but the same outcome happens. Whether you do it ignorantly or on purpose, it causes the same pain. And so we have to admit when we're wrong. We have to be more inclusive about what we do, why we do it. We have to make sure that we're listening to the voices of the people who are most marginalized. Right. And so we're placing their voice and what they think at the front of what we do. And so that's how we do it. I mean, we listen. We spend time together. And most importantly, I think that in planting this kind of church, it happened really slow. It happened really slow. Honestly, with the model of church planting that we have, that I was given at training, that doesn't work for this. And so I had to modify. I had to push back on the homogeneous unit principle church planting methods, the systems of a church plant. Like, you have to create your own kind of thing, because it's the context is what matters to us here. And so I had to push back. As a congregation, we had to push back on a lot of the stuff that we were given, and try to think about how to do this the way God wants us to do it. And so that's how we've gotten to this place, is prayer, Holy Spirit, and faith, and loving each other, and having times where we come together and we talk about the elephants in the room. What are the elephants in the room we need to talk about? And name it for what it is.
When I visited you, I tend to preach prophetically, though with humor, so people don't feel it as harsh. Yes. I did not get any pushback from the church, because you preach pretty prophetically already. But yeah. I had a great time in your church. I can't wait to come back and visit you.
We had a great time with you as well.
Yeah. So what's your approach? A lot of our pastors are thinking, preaching might be a little complicated when you have such diverse people. You have people that know the gospel and they can teach it 3 times better than you. And then you have brand new people. How do you preach a sermon that encompasses everyone? What's your approach to preaching when you deal not only with people in different levels of their maturity in Christ, but multiculturally, the African-American church that loves proclamation and redemption, and the Latino church that loves the humor and the celebration, and you have some of our Anglo brothers and sisters who love liturgy and they love order and not very long services. How do you reconcile all of that, Pastor?
Yeah. So one of the things I realized growing up in the African-American church is that the history of the African-American church was in itself resistance to white dominant culture. And so that was the one place that African-Americans historically could get away for one day a week and not be dominated by whiteness. Mm. And so to be a multi-ethnic church, oftentimes we say multi-ethnic, multi-class, but really what we're talking about is just diverse whiteness. It's very white. It just happens to be some diversity, because oftentimes white culture is okay as long as it looks diverse, and it stops there. And so for us, it was saying that Western values are not going to be the dominant values of this church. So then, okay, liturgies are important. We'll do them sometimes, but we won't be doing them every Sunday. So what it is like the people who are marginalized. These are the people that we are. This is the reflection that we need to be demonstrating more often. Why? Is because you can go, most of the world is white. You go to businesses, you go to workplaces, organizations, it's ran by white culture. Dress code is white culture, right? And so like, if we cannot reduplicate that in the church, and call it justice, because actually it perpetuates injustice and part of the problem in our larger society. So then Dr. Rusty Hawkins, he's a professor at IWU, and one of the things that he says is, he says, as a middle-class white male who's privileged, my discipleship is actually coming here and being uncomfortable. What I need is, I don't need the church to cater to me. I need the church to challenge me and make me uncomfortable so that I'm forced to grow. If all we do is appease white people, then I'm not going to grow. So that's been our approach to this, is thinking about the ways in which, what are the things that minority groups of people can help disciple white people on.
Yeah,
I think that.
Yeah, sorry. And if people heard you say that, they would think that, that Anglos are not welcome in the church, and that's not,
Oh, no.
Absolutely not the truth. You have a component of our Anglo brothers and sisters there who are leading also with you. And
Absolutely. Preaching.
so, yeah, absolutely. You have some amazing people there.
Absolutely. So we have a very diverse preaching team. Bart Brewer is he's a New Testament scholar. He's writing a commentary on the book of Luke right now. And, but but
a tiny little named Luke.
Yeah, but he's the kind of guy that, we want him to preach, because it's not about uniformity. It's about really appreciating diversity and listening to marginalized voices and learning, right? But Bart brings something to the table. Melissa Sprock and Andrew Sprock, it's a husband and wife couple. They both have their MDivs and they preach sometimes. But then we have also people who don't have a degree who preach, right? Who don't have any kind of formal education. Elder Chris Robinson, he's preaching this Sunday, and he's going to preach, right? And so really learning how to do this dance together and to do it well, and diversity is beautiful. Like it's not a bad thing. And so I don't mind liturgies. Liturgies have their place, right? I think that liturgies are beautiful. So I'm not saying we don't ever do liturgies. We do liturgies. But what I'm saying is that can't be the thing that dominates like it has.
Right. There's so much more that I want to say about your church, but our time is almost coming to a close. There was an amazing Christianity Today article that came out 2 days ago or yesterday. Was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
That was just amazing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Julie Moore, so professors, right? We have professors, we have people who are professors, and we have people who are looking for jobs, all of this at the same church. Like, this is part of the work that God's called us to. And so, so she's a professor at Taylor University, and she's a literature professor. And she wrote this article about her life, her upbringing, her experience as a middle-class white woman, and how, like, she was always around people who were like her, same class, same white people. And talks about how, like, living into the beloved community, how transformative this has been for her. And she's talking about her experience as a white woman in culture, and how being part of a reconciling church body that's seeking the beloved community, how transformative that is for her. And so she shares some of my story in there. She shares some stories about the church, the ministry of the church, and some of the things that we do, how we live out our faith, and what makes some of the things we do significant for her that are a little different than what she was used to.
Yeah, well, we're gonna put that in our comments so that people can access that, because it's a beautiful article. It's a little long, but you can't help to be that long from everything that God has done in your church. Now, I know you're not meeting in your church right now because you're out of space. You're not in your building. You own a building, but so I remember when I was there last year, you were trying to build out this hall, this space. I'm not quite sure how to describe that, to make it into a bigger sanctuary, because you really were, it was a full house already. But that takes money, right? So, slowly but surely. But you're not even able to meet in the building right now because there's just too many people. What are you doing?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is before this happened, we began to have, back in November, we started meeting at the Boys and Girls Club. And so we were growing through that because our space was maxed. One of the things that, that I heard about church planting is like when a room is 75% full, it's done. Like you need to be thinking about a bigger space. And so we'd maxed that space out a long time ago. And so we moved to the Boys and Girls Club, one, because we had some issues in our building that we had to take care of. We got removed from our building for a while. But two, like if we're going to grow, it's going to come with a bigger space. And thinking about a second service is like for a church plant, it's for a reconciling church plant. It's already hard in the numbers.
Oh yeah.
So then to do a second service, I think sometimes it just puts a lot of burden and pressure on people that we just don't need. So the best solution was a bigger space. So we went to the Boys and Girls Club and we used one of their gymnasiums. And it worked out great. We actually grew through it. I think in terms of like numbers, you think about people coming like 80, 85 were coming. And then like February, March, April, like 130, 135. Wow. And so we started like really growing through this transition and realizing that we do need a bigger space. So we're going to go back to the Boys and Girls Club until we get our sanctuary space remodeled and finished to where we can actually, just bare bones to where we can move in there and begin to worship in that space. We're not going to be able to come back to this building.
Well, so one of the needs then that we want to pray with you is about being able to remodel your building and have that, because that's a nice space that you have there.
It's a blessing.
I can see that being just a state-of-the-art place. Just how you got your building through the town, it's just another amazing story. And I was a fan of yours already before I came to visit, but when I came to visit, I was just blown away by what God has done through your leadership. You are so well known throughout the whole community, throughout the whole town. People know who you are. They know that you are a resource to them. And we just see this moving and growing because of the grace that God has placed on you, but also the grace that you have towards other people that are also searching. And you're very open and transparent about your own personal struggles, so that people can really relate to you. Sometimes we make the gospel to say, well, you can't be broken if you want to come and at least appear to be okay, and then God will deal with you indirectly, but just don't get us involved. And that's not what real community is about. If you're broken, this is the place for you. And I heard that several times through your service. So I want to let you know we're very proud of the fact that you're part of the Central Conference, that we are partners with you, and we are seeking more partners so that we can remodel this space and make it a space where you can be safely, especially post-COVID. Things change very different. Things are very different now. So I want to let you know, we're just so proud of the fact that you are part of the Central Conference.
Thank you.
And my love to your family, my love to your leaders, and I hope to be with you in the very near future. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Pastor.
Blessings to you.
Blessings to you too.